There's a strange moment that happens when you stop explaining yourself. The world freezes for a second, like it can't understand your silence. People lean in, trying to provoke a reaction, searching for the old version of you that always rushed to please, to fix, to respond. But that version is gone. You've stopped being emotionally available to everyone, and the air changes. The same voices that once drained you start to sound distant. The same chaos that used to pull you in now collapses without your reaction. It's not magic, it's energy. When you withdraw your attention, you break invisible contracts that others built on your compliance. You begin to reclaim what was never lost: your presence, your time, your peace. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." But he forgot to add this: everything that drains you about others can also reveal the part of you that still feels guilty for saying no. So the real question isn't who's taking your energy, it's why do you keep giving it away? Today I want to show you what really happens when you stop being available. Not the poetic version, the real one. The one where you lose people, lose comfort, lose illusions, and finally find power. Let's begin. 1. The hidden addiction always being there. Most people don't realize this, but being constantly available isn't kindness. It's addiction dressed as virtue. You don't rush to reply because you care that much. You rush because silence feels dangerous. Because if you don't answer, you might be replaced. And that quiet fear of losing love, approval, connection has turned into a lifelong reflex. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask you wear to survive. You learned to say yes when your soul screamed no, to smile when you were breaking, to keep giving so no one would leave. But every yes, spoken in fear of rejection, is self-betrayal in slow motion. And the Stoics would say, that's the exact moment you lost your freedom. Epictetus wrote, "If anyone can make you angry, they have become your master." But it's not just anger. If someone can make you rush, explain, or apologize for existing, they become your master too. The addiction to being available is the most accepted form of slavery. You give your time, your peace, your emotional energy to anyone who knocks, even those who never deserve the door to be open. You call it empathy, but often it's fear, the fear of what happens when you stop serving everyone's needs but your own. That's why you're exhausted, not from work, not from life, but from over-functioning in a world that feeds on your reaction. Your empathy has become a marketplace, your peace, a public property. And here's the cruel truth: the more available you are, the less valuable you become. Because everything that's predictable becomes invisible. No one respects what they can reach anytime. The Stoics warned about this 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one in modern words. Stop performing goodness. Start protecting your boundaries." A man who's always available can never hear his own mind. And when a man can't hear himself, he mistakes noise for purpose. So step back. Let people wonder where your energy went. Let the noise starve without your reaction. You don't need to explain your absence. It explains itself. This is not cruelty. This is correction. Jung would say you are withdrawing your projections, calling back your scattered pieces. The Stoics would say you are finally living by nature, no longer ruled by guilt or approval. Remember this: to always be available is to always be divided. To say yes to everyone is to abandon the one person who truly needs you, yourself. If that line felt close to home, just notice it. Maybe it's your soul asking to be heard again. So from this moment forward, start choosing your silence like it's gold, because it is, and the world will start treating it that way once you do. But remember, peace doesn't demand disappearance. It asks for precision. You don't have to stop loving people. You just have to stop losing yourself to keep them. That's how presence turns from exhaustion into power. 2. Protecting the inner current. Every day you wake up inside an invisible current, a stream woven from thoughts, emotions, and choices. Carl Jung called it psychic energy. The Stoics called it the inner citadel. Different words, same truth. Your life force is sacred territory. But here's the problem. Most people guard their passwords better than their peace. They let anyone enter their mind, rearrange their mood, and feed on their focus. It's not your fault. You were simply never taught how to guard your peace. They call it connection, but it's often just permission. Permission for the world to drain them one reaction at a time. Jung said energy never disappears. It just changes form. What you repress becomes tension. What you ignore becomes a pattern, and what you overreact to becomes your master. Awareness is never punishment. It's the first act of power. That's why protecting your peace isn't superstition. It's maintenance of your inner current. And that's exactly why you feel drained. Not because life is heavy, but because you're leaking light. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That's not philosophy. That's spiritual physics. Your peace begins the moment you stop letting other people steer your emotions. Think about how often you leak energy without noticing it. Someone criticizes you, and you defend yourself. A stranger disrespects you, and you replay it all day. You write paragraphs in your head for conversations that will never happen. That's not reflection, it's energetic hemorrhage. And once you see that clearly, you've already begun to heal. The Stoics warned against this. They practiced preparation of the mind, a daily discipline of expectation and detachment. Today, they would say, I will meet the selfish, the ungrateful, the arrogant, not as prophecy, but as protection. So when the world disappoints you, you don't take it personally. You simply recognize it as part of the game. Protecting your energy doesn't mean building walls. It means learning to breathe behind them. It means responding from clarity instead of emotion. It means choosing where your mind rests when chaos calls your name. Here's something practical. When someone tries to pull you into their storm, feel the space before you answer. That's your freedom. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And courage, in modern terms, is the ability to stay still when everyone else demands a reaction. If you master that moment, you'll begin to feel something shift. You'll notice that silence can disarm manipulation faster than anger ever could. You'll realize that boundaries aren't cold, they're clean. That stillness isn't weakness, it's structure. And slowly, your energy starts to change shape. You stop chasing understanding and start radiating clarity. You stop trying to convince people and start conserving peace. You stop fearing what leaves because what's real never drains you. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The Stoics would nod and add, "Until you make your reactions deliberate, the world will control you and you will call it love." I used to think peace meant being untouched. Now I know it means being unshaken. Life won't stop throwing noise at you, but you'll start hearing it differently. That's when you know the healing has begun. Look at Nelson Mandela. 27 years behind bars, yet his mind remained free. They could lock his body, but not his perception. That's the difference between a prisoner and a Stoic. One is confined, the other is composed. Protect your current. It's not selfish. It's sacred maintenance. Because peace is not what you find after the world calms down. It's what you create when you master your own energy within it. 3. The manipulation game. There's a cruel irony in human nature. The moment you start healing, you become dangerous to those who live off your chaos. Most people don't consciously manipulate. They just sense your empathy, your predictability, and build their comfort on it. They know what makes you explain, defend, rush back. They press the same buttons, and you react every single time. Jung called this the projection game. People throw their unhealed parts onto you, then blame you for the mess they made. They turn your compassion into a leash, and you, thinking it's love, keep returning to the same dynamic, believing you can fix it. But you can't heal someone who benefits from your wounds. Who came to your mind when you heard that? Here's the dark truth. The manipulator doesn't need power. They only need you to keep reacting the same way. Because your reaction is their proof that the old version of you still exists, that they still own a piece of your energy. But energy can only be owned if you keep handing it over. You say, I can't help it, it's who I am. But that's not identity. That's programming. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Every emotional trap you fall into is a pattern asking to be seen, not repeated. The tale of the scorpion and the monk. There's an old tale. A monk once found a scorpion drowning in the river. He reached out to save it, and the scorpion stung him. Pain shot up his arm. He dropped it. Then without hesitation, he reached again, and the scorpion stung him again. A man passing by shouted, "Are you insane? Why keep saving something that keeps hurting you?" The monk smiled and said, "It is the scorpion's nature to sting. It is mine to save. But next time, I will use a leaf." That's the difference between being reactive and being aware. The monk didn't change his compassion. He changed his method. He learned what Jung called integration, awareness without absorption, and what the Stoics called wisdom in action, love guided by reason. You don't need to stop caring. You just need to stop being stung the same way twice. Because growth is not losing your heart. It's learning how to guard it with grace. And this is where the Stoics enter the room. They don't fight manipulation. They outgrow it. They train their perception until provocation loses its meaning. Marcus Aurelius said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be." He wasn't denying pain. He was teaching alchemy, the art of turning offense into observation. When you stop reacting, you break invisible contracts. The person who once controlled you through guilt or anger suddenly faces their own reflection. Your silence becomes a mirror. And most people can't stand what they see. They'll call you cold, distant, arrogant, but that's just their discomfort with the version of you they can no longer manipulate. Here's the paradox. You don't win this game by fighting back. You win by refusing to play, by choosing not to explain your worth to those committed to misunderstanding it. So when they provoke, don't answer. When they distort your truth, don't justify. When they pull, stay still. Epictetus said, if someone treats you unjustly, the harm is theirs, not yours, if you choose not to feel wronged. This is what freedom looks like. Not indifference, but control. Every reaction you withhold is a declaration of sovereignty. Every silence you choose is a small act of rebellion against emotional slavery. You stop being a puppet in someone else's theater and become the playwright of your own. This is how energy shifts. Not through revenge or confrontation, but through calm, deliberate detachment. And that, my friend, is the power that terrifies manipulators the most. The calm you no longer owe them. 4. The Energy Thieves. Not every attack comes with loud words or sharp eyes. Some arrive smiling, wearing concern, speaking softly, and leave you exhausted without ever raising their voice. Jung once said, "What you resist persists, but what you absorb unconsciously, that drains you." Energy thieves rarely mean harm. They simply learn to survive by feeding off someone else's light. They arrive when you are kind, open, and slightly tired. The perfect time to test your boundaries. You know the feeling. You meet someone for lunch and walk away hollow. You get a message that feels urgent, but it's just emotional bait. You spend hours fixing someone else's storm and then realize your own calm is gone. That's not compassion, that's consumption. The Stoics warned about this in their own language. Seneca wrote, "Associate with those who make you better. Welcome those you can improve. The process is mutual." In other words, energy must circulate, not just escape. When you give endlessly to someone who only takes, you're not helping them heal, you're teaching them to depend. And here's the hidden pattern. Energy thieves don't always look toxic. Some hide behind crisis, others behind flattery. They say, "I just need to talk." But what they mean is, "I need you to feel my chaos so I don't have to." The Stoic way isn't to hate them. It's to observe without absorption. You don't need to fight, block, or vanish. Just notice who leaves you smaller after contact, because your body knows before your mind admits it. Protecting your peace doesn't make you cold. It makes you clean. And clarity is sacred. It keeps you from carrying pain that was never yours. When you learn to step back, you'll notice something strange. You start feeling lighter, sharper, almost electric. Your presence begins to recharge instead of react. Look at Nelson Mandela. 27 years in a cell, and still he emerged with a calm so luminous it melted hatred. They could cage his body but not his energy, because freedom is not where you stand. It's what you refuse to surrender within. So the next time someone pulls at your peace, don't rush to fix them. Breathe, watch, decide. You don't owe your energy to every story that cries your name. You owe it to the one you're still writing. Your owe. 5. The Stoic Silence. There is a kind of silence that doesn't hide, it commands. Not the silence of fear, but of presence. When you stop explaining yourself, the air changes. The noise loses its audience, and suddenly your absence starts speaking louder than all your words ever could. Jung once said, "Solitude is not absence of company, but the moment when our soul is free to speak to us." He understood that silence isn't emptiness, it's exposure. It's where the shadow comes forward, where the truth you've been avoiding finally has space to breathe. But most people never reach that space because they mistake noise for life. They keep talking, arguing, oversharing, because they fear the quiet mirror of their own mind. So they drown themselves in explanations, forgetting that peace was never found in the crowd, only in the pause. The Stoics lived by that pause. Epictetus taught, "Be silent or let your words be worth more than silence." He wasn't preaching suppression, he was teaching strategy. Silence isn't weakness, it's calibration. It's how you separate impulse from intention, emotion from wisdom. Every reaction you withhold, every moment you let stillness settle before speaking, you sharpen your awareness. You start to see patterns others miss. How certain people need conflict to feel alive. How certain voices only grow loud when they sense your attention. And then you begin to master the ancient art of psychological Aikido. You don't block force with resistance, you redirect it with stillness. Abraham Lincoln mastered this art. When critics attacked him, he stayed silent, not out of weakness, but wisdom. His calm disarmed his enemies more than his words ever could. He knew that silence is not the absence of response. It's the presence of power. The Stoic silence is not passive. It's the most active form of control. Because it governs energy instead of wasting it. It turns you from reactor to observer, from victim to strategist. But silence is not for cowards. It will test you. You will feel misunderstood, accused of arrogance, cut off from circles that once depended on your reaction. But that's the proof you're evolving. You're no longer food for their noise. Here's what most people don't realize. When you stop talking, you start transmitting. Your stillness becomes signal. Your energy begins to communicate for you. People sense boundaries without you needing to announce them. That's what Stoic mastery looks like. Invisible order. And it's not just spiritual, it's practical. Because when you stop spending energy defending your image, you finally have the energy to build your reality. When you no longer chase approval, you start attracting respect. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So imagine what happens when your thoughts become quiet. When you stop letting the outside world dictate your palette, you start coloring your life with focus, clarity, and calm. Silence, then, isn't retreat. It's return to your center, to your sanity, to your strength. So when the world tries to provoke you, don't rush to speak. Let silence do the talking. Because those who misunderstand your quiet today will one day envy the peace it gave you. If you've ever chosen silence instead of reaction, you already understand what strength really sounds like. Pause for a moment. You've walked through noise and silence, through people who fed on your peace and survived. You've learned to pull back your energy, to stop reacting, to let stillness speak louder than defense. You began trying to be understood. Now you've become someone who no longer needs to explain. That's not coldness. That's clarity. This is the quiet power the world never taught you. To move or die. To rise beyond the old self or stay lost in the noise. This is Move or Die Stoic. 6. The rebirth through sacred solitude. At some point, the noise fades. Not because the world got quieter, but because you stopped answering every echo. And what used to feel like loneliness starts feeling like peace. That's when the real transformation begins, in the silence you once feared. Jung wrote that individuation requires separation from the collective. He meant that to become whole, you must walk alone for a while. Not forever, just long enough to hear your own voice beneath the weight of everyone else's expectations. Solitude is not punishment, it's purification. It's where the old identity melts, where the masks crack and the fragments of who you thought you had to be start falling away like ash after fire. You lose people, you lose comfort, but you also lose confusion. But here's the paradox. Solitude doesn't make you stronger because you escape people. It makes you stronger because you finally meet the one person you've been avoiding the most, yourself. Have you ever felt that strange moment when silence felt heavy, then suddenly holy? You stop mistaking attention for love, noise for connection, and approval for peace. The Stoics called this living according to nature, not trees and rivers, but the inner nature of your being, a life aligned with truth instead of fear. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." In solitude, you rediscover that retreat. The absence of distraction becomes medicine. The emptiness that used to scare you starts to heal you. You begin to notice small miracles, how the morning light touches your face differently, how silence carries warmth when it's no longer filled with anxiety. This is the rebirth no one talks about. It doesn't happen with fireworks or applause. It happens in quiet rooms, in long walks, in moments where you finally stop negotiating your worth. At first, it feels like death, the death of who you were for others. But look closely. Beneath that grief lies a new clarity, a knowing that you no longer need to chase what was never meant to stay. Solitude teaches you that you were never abandoned. You were redirected. Every loss was a form of guidance. Every silence from others was an invitation to listen to yourself again. And slowly, what used to be emptiness turns into space. Space for creation, for peace, for real love. Jung would call this integration, when the shadow and the light finally meet. The Stoics would call it virtue, living in harmony with your own reason and soul. But you will simply call it home. Because solitude, when understood, isn't loneliness, it's sovereignty. It's the space where you stop being available to everything that breaks you and start becoming available to everything that builds you. So if you ever find yourself walking alone, don't rush back into the noise. Stay a little longer. Let the silence finish its work. Because when you rise again, you won't need to announce it. The world will feel it. 7. The law of return. Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, it transforms." That's the secret of life's symmetry. Every reaction you outgrow returns as peace in another form. When you've walked through silence long enough, you start to feel a rhythm return, not from the world, but from life itself. Everything you've given, love, effort, patience, it circles back. Not always from the same people, but always from the same source, the field you've built within. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And that's the secret of spiritual exchange. When you rise in peace, you stop reacting and start transforming every space you enter. You no longer chase outcomes. You create resonance. Your energy speaks first, and the world answers." The Stoics understood this law long before physics gave it a name. They believed virtue attracts virtue, that calm invites clarity, that a disciplined mind becomes a magnet for peace. That's why Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." The more you live in truth, the more truth returns to you, sometimes through strangers, sometimes through silence, sometimes through opportunities that appear like destiny. But the law of return doesn't always come gently. Sometimes it returns as silence, because that's the only language you were ready to hear. And sometimes it returns as loss, because what left was too small for your next chapter. The law of return isn't superstition, it's alignment. You no longer beg for fairness, because you understand that what you are, you multiply. After solitude comes symmetry. You stop asking, "When will life reward me?" and start realizing, every boundary you've set, every moment you chose peace over validation, was already changing your orbit. The tide you thought you lost is returning, not to the same shore, but to a clearer one. The people who left are replaced by those who vibrate higher. The silence that once felt empty is now full of possibility. When you rise healed, the world rearranges around your frequency. You don't chase what left. You attract what matches your calm. You don't demand recognition. You embody it. Every silence you respected was already preparing your reward. And this is how the universe honors a soul that guards its light. Not with applause, but with alignment. Because peace, once protected, doesn't just return, it multiplies. So this is where the journey leads. Not to perfection, but to peace. When you stop being available to everyone, you start becoming available to yourself. You realize that nothing real was ever lost. Only distractions that once kept you away from your truth. Freedom isn't about escaping the world. It's about no longer being ruled by it. It's walking through noise without letting it rearrange your inner calm. It's facing rejection and realizing it doesn't touch your worth. The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, but serenity. The unshakable steadiness of a man who has made peace with both his light and his shadow. Jung called it integration. The moment you stop dividing yourself into what's acceptable and what's not, and instead start living as a whole being. You're not who you were when this started. You've withdrawn from the world's noise only to hear the music within. You've stopped chasing love and started radiating it from your own silence. And maybe that's the ultimate lesson, that healing isn't about becoming untouchable, it's about becoming unbreakable. Because when your peace no longer depends on their attention, no one can take it from you. Now breathe. You walked through the same streets, but the echo no longer owns you. You found your center again. You walk through the same streets, but the echo no longer owns you. The world stays loud, yet somehow you stay untouched. Because peace has finally become your native language. From here on, you don't need to explain your calm. You don't need to prove your worth. Just live it, quietly, fully, and free. Because when you stop feeding chaos, the current of life starts flowing toward you again. If this stayed with you, carry it quietly. The world will feel it.